start after my supervisor. Laura is my supervisor. Yeah. And I never said this actually, but she's always very humble, and very kind. And she always treated me as if that I know better than her. And that's not right. But I'm always really grateful for having her. Thank you so much, Laura. So I'm going to talk about Perezhivanie and transition. And actually, that is one of the first time that I'm talking about my PhD. In other conferences, I never talked about my PhD project, but today I'm talking about it. And I want to start from the very beginning because always philosophers have tried to answer this question, which one is more important, environment or the person? And from Socrates to Plato and then German ideology, which is my favorite part of the philosophy, they try to answer this question. And then Marx actually tried to answer this question, I guess, better than everyone, and kind of found the answer for this question, which is the birthplace of historical materialism. Because always people would try to say that, yes, the person is more important, the subjectivity is important, or the environment more important. But Marx tried to say that no, the combination of both, how a person in the environment think and behave, this is important. So that is the birthplace of historical materialism. When Marx said men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. So I guess in this sentence, we can see that what he was trying to say. Yes, we as people, as subjects, can change, but this change really depends on the environment that we have and all the things that we belong. And why I'm talking about historical materialism when I want to talk about Perezhivanie? Because I guess Perezhivanie is the unit of analysis for understanding historical materialism. If, as Marxists, we believe that historical materialism is the ontology of our tradition, so we need to find a kind of unit of analysis to understand the person and the environment and the unity of person and environment. So this is the moment that Perezhivanie become very important because it allows us to understand how individuals relate to their environment, not as a separate form, but as part of unified process. So Laura tried to talk about Perezhivanie very beautifully. The issue is that the way Vasiliuk look at Perezhivanie, as she explained, is different from how Vygotsky himself look at Perezhivanie. And I found what he himself talk about it more interesting because we don't have such a concept like Perezhivanie, which is interconnected, to show that the interconnectedness of person and environment. But what Vasiliuk tried to say, I think a lot of psychologists have talked about trauma or how we deal with, problems in our life. So Perezhivanie is interesting for me because it's the unity of person and environment. And yeah, Perezhivanie, we cannot really find a good word in English if we want to translate Perezhivanie. So we should keep going on and say Perezhivanie, which is a Russian word. And if we want to translate it in a very bad way, we can say that it's a kind of a lived experience, but they had another Russian people, if we have a Russian person or any person from that area, they know that they have another word for experience, so experience doesn't really mention the importance of Perezhivanie. So this concept is really important for cultural historical activity theories and also critical psychology and those who really try to understand people. So now that I talked about historical materialism and about Perezhivanie, now I want to tell you about my project. I'm trying to understand life of refugees here in Manchester. So my main question, which I'm not going to talk about this today, is how we can transform social non-movement to social movements, how refugees can be radicalized, socialized, politicized to create their own social movements. But today, I am just I'm just going to talk about briefly about the Perezhivanie, how I'm trying to understand the Perezhivanie of refugees. So to do this, I argue that we need to pay attention to important parts of lives of refugees. First is about the political economy of the countries that these refugees are living in it or they have lived there. So I'm looking at Iranian Farsi speakers refugees. So I'm looking at Iran political economy, and because they are living in Manchester, I'm also looking at England political economy. So I'm looking at the asylum systems, labor markets, welfare regimes, and on the other hand, which is the most important part for me, is that how these political economies have shaped these subjectivities. Because we learned from Vygotsky that the Perezhivanie is the connection of me as a person with the environment. So how I, as a refugee, have been connected with the political economy, which is trying to shape, a personality. So for this, I need to talk about another part of tradition in Marxism because it is not a new question that I'm trying to answer. Before me, there was a really big debate between Althusser and also E.P. Thompson. So they both had really interesting discussions, and they tried to actually have a debate about which one is more important. Definitely, as maybe you understood, I'm following E.P. Thompson, but when I'm sad and hopeless, I would prefer to say no. I prefer to follow Althusser because it's all about the structure. So I wanted to kind of connect and make a kind of dialogue between Althusser, which he believes more in a structure, and E.P. Thompson, who believes more into people and how agency, how their everyday life can change the world. So I wanted to kind of connect these two spheres together. And for this, I approach the question from two interconnected dimensions. So first, I look at the political economy of Iran and also England. And the second part is that I try to do workshops, interviews, and kind of living with refugees that gave me this understanding that how is really the life of refugees. And I think by doing this, I could, not completely, but I could have a taste of what is their Perezhivanie in Manchester. So if we want, now talking about Iran is very complicated because, after just finishing, I'm personally Iranian, so I can say whatever I like about. Yeah, because now Iran is very popular and everyone think that Iran is the anti-imperialist country, which is not. But definitely my main problem is US. My big enemy is US and their allies and fuck Israel. But the issue is that Iran also is not an innocent country and have killed their own citizens. And we should be honest and ethical and critical about both. But the issue is that, yes, US and Israel are so, they are the symbol of evil. So they are in another category. I'm not going to talk about it. But I'm going to talk about Iran political economy. So we are dealing with authoritarian regime which repress, control, and also very violent. And the violence is, shaping everyday life of people there. And individuals actually, like, that was one a funny part. Oh, no, I'm going to talk about it. So in Iran, people are not citizens. They are the subjects of the supreme leader. So the imam actually should decide for the people. And at the same time, these political economies are kind of connected how the devils like US, UK, and other Western countries, they try to decide for us. So they kind of do sanctions, they do whatever they like, and they try to suppress us. So we are dealing with an authoritarian regime and also imperialist countries who think that they know what they can do for us. And they try to make war, sanctions, whatever kind of intervention that they like, which who tell them? Yeah, we don't need them to free us. We ourselves can free ourselves. So we don't need any kind of foreign intervention. So we are dealing with this kind of political intervention as well from the imperialist countries. And when we look at political economy of Iran, there are different kinds of analysis, but I'm mainly looking at, I'm looking at Wahhabi, how he understood political economy of Iran, which he believes that Iran's political economy is a form of predatory or non-productive political economy, where wealth is generated through appropriation and access to power rather than production. So, what kind of subject does this political economy produce? When we look at this in this context, so people, individuals, are not formed as active, right-bearing citizens, but as controlled and marginalized subjects. And political participation is limited and does not allow for real agency, although we have seen from the glorious and important revolution that happened in 1979 in Iran that people try to overthrow monarchies, which is funny. Again, monarchists are now shouting that we need to get back to Iran. So they show their agency, and from 1979 till now, we have seen amazing uprising, amazing social movements in Iran, but always heavily and brutally suppressed. And over the time, this produced a sense of powerlessness because you feel like, okay, I'm just doing whatever I can. And you could see, especially in 1918 of December, that thousands of people had been killed. And these brave people were out to say that we don't want this regime, but the regime just killed them. So they showed their agency. They are trying to fight, but what they are saying is that whatever we do, this regime wouldn't go. Yeah, my dad always saying that, yeah, this regime is going. And my dad died and, the regime is still there. So, and when no viable pathway of change remains, displacement emerged not as a choice, but as a necessity, because you think that, okay, I cannot change anything. I do not have money. I cannot live here. So I need to go, I need to move, I need to go to another country. And then the more interesting part is about Britain political economy. So Britain represents a consolidated form of neoliberal capitalism. It's a kind of Hannibal capitalism, which is one of the scariest kind of capitalism. And since 1980s, we are dealing with a kind of privatization and labor market flexibilization that intensify this insecurity. Mm-hmm. And when we look at how Harvey looked at the political economy of Britain, he also tried to show us the importance of accumulation by disposition. And this shows how lives of working class, subaltern people is awful in Britain, and especially in England. And imagine how the lives of migrants, especially refugees, should be. And within this system, then the labor market have become increasingly precarious. That's one of the things that people are dealing with it. And urban restructuring further displaced lower income population. You can see all these beautiful skyscrapers in Manchester that, you can see all these gentrified neighborhoods that working class and poor people cannot really afford living in those neighborhoods that they belong to them. And now, lots of wealthy students are living there. So, or as Anderson shows, the legal status plays also a key role in organizing migrants as a form of exploitable labor. That's funny. When they need us as migrants, they would say that refugees are welcome here. But as soon as they don't need us and they are in crisis, refugees, you should get back to your boats and get back to your own countries. So it really depends on the political economy, how they treat migrants and refugees. And these produce central contradictions. Migrants are economically necessary, yet socially and politically restricted. And within this political economy, refugees are positioned as a marginal and precarious part of a labor force, and their lives are marked by insecurity, racialization, and conditional inclusion. And they exist in a constant state of suspension. They don't know, do I belong to here or not? Do they like me or not? And the answer really depends on the political economy. So, and when you are as a refugee living in a horrible situation with minimum conditions of survival, you produce a kind of self-regulating subject, one who internalize gratitude, moderate demands, and avoid risk. They don't like Britain. They don't like the food that they are giving to them in the hotels. They have problems with the managers, blah, blah, blah. But they cannot say it because they're afraid that if we protest, if we say anything, they would just cut off what they have given to us. So although some sense of stability is regained, but the subjectivity remains limited and managed. They are managing this subjectivity, which is shaped by precarity, labor exhaustion, and social marginality. So I always say this, that in Iran, they kill us with a sharp knife, a razor, They kill us like very in an honest way. We kill you. But in Britain, they kill us with a cotton. So it's really more painful. But you cannot understand this because gradually they are killing us with this. And yeah, so these are different forms, but they produce similar effects: dispossession, marginalization, and limited, restricted agency. So in Iranian context, under conditions of repression and silencing, the subject is pushed toward becoming an object, losing agency and capacity to act. And when they come to England, they think that, okay, everything changed. Now we are in a free world. But that's the big lie. It is not a free world. So the refugee begins to feel like a subject again, but all this racism, sexism, precarity, repression would happen, and they feel that again a kind of restricted agency. So, however, the subjectivity is limited and conditioned, and it exists within a structure of control, precarity, and restriction. So yeah, that was my presentation, and yeah, from Rojava to Palestine, woman, life, freedom. Thank you so much.